Good morning. We're going to officially call this workshop to order. And Mr. Hewitt, you want to give us some guidance here?
Well, I can tell you what I did. Before we go into looking at the sheet that I assembled based on the commissioners' inputs to me, I've also included another copy of the draft schedule that the commissioners looked at back at the December meeting. After talking to the clerk, the executive secretary, and reflecting back on the minutes, it wasn't clear to me that this schedule was what the commissioners wanted to follow. We established this meeting, the date for this meeting, but I didn't get a yes, let's go ahead with that. And that's kind of what I asked the commissioners to do, is to amend or bless this schedule so we can have the framework to move forward on through the budget season. For example, the 24th of February is the Canal Dredging Working Group meeting, and now that the plan was approved by the commissioners, we can regroup around that with the working group folks, and I can establish, I can coordinate that working group meeting. But the other workshop items and elements that are on the schedule, we've got, the staff's got other things that we need to be coordinating. The budget is of preeminent importance, but the realities of the day-to-day work around here is we got other things to do, and it'd be real good if we had this schedule nailed down so we can work around it.
Do you have a time for that February 24th canal dredging group?
I just sent the invite to the folks out over the weekend and hadn't got their responses on availability on that specific day anyway yet. Normally, that is a Friday. Normally, we shoot for 3 o'clock because a couple of the fellows travel, and that works good for them coming back into town to do it Friday evening, but
and that's with those representatives from
yes, that's not a board,
groups.
that's
No.
not a board thing. But since it is such a big piece of the development of the budget and a discrete fund, it's kind of a big thing.
Gotcha.
It should be a lot easier this year with the revamping, I won't say revamping, but the updating of the program, and that program itself is now very mature. We kind of know what we're doing there.
David, I'd like to kind of talk about some of the goals and things because I do see a need for a change of this, not a change, but additions to this calendar. But unless you want me to jump right into it, I think it would make more sense later on in the meeting. Because example, there's nothing about expenses. I think we should have a meeting, workshop, whatever you want to call it, talking about expenses, how we're going to, and revenues, but how we're going to meet our goals.
Well, I think I left that off the 15th April line there when I actually did that,
So where it says board workshop,
on 15th April, yeah.
so it should say board workshop expenses.
Mm-hmm.
Does that give us enough time? I mean, my goal, the last budget, we were brand new. My goal is to be, a little bit more involved, but not, I'm not looking to micromanage. I'm just looking to give some guidance. I know it's your budget, but, it's our responsibility to give some guidance on it. So I don't think last time we had chance as far as the calendar. You know, I felt rushed. I felt that it was, you know, we were less involved, more of an approval. So I'd like to see, and I'd like to see that pushed further up the calendar, or if you feel there's enough time to do that, that's fine, but that's my general, I don't want to just approve the budget, I want to be a part of the budget at a high level.
David, my view on this has been from the beginning, what I don't like to end up is having a last minute being pressed to make a decision. So if we could move things back about 10 days, so that if the board would be in a position to approve the budget on the 20th of June, having had a public hearing maybe 10 days before or something like that, just back it up about 10 days or 2 weeks to give the board, so it never becomes a crisis at the end that you've got to do it or you've failed to approve a budget in time. And I think another 2 weeks for the board to review and for the public to have seen what we're proposing would be a healthier process for us anyway.
So you want to move the 15 April to 1 April?
That's, I just checked it on my thing. Yeah, if you could move that back to the 1st of April, the budget message on May 15th, the public hearing on June 10th. That's just my, I don't know how anybody else feels, but that, for me, that would work really well to cut down the stress of having a decision at the very last minute.
So you want to have and what you're talking about on the 10th of June is a separate special meeting on the 10th of June?
Well, we got a 20th of June public hearing right now. Just make it the 10th of June.
Okay, and that public hearing is
During the board meeting.
is during the regular board meeting on the 20th. So if we move it to the 10th,
If you move to the 10th, then we could approve it at the next board meeting.
you just want to have the public
Stay at a
hearing.
meeting.
What's that?
You're asking for a special meeting, not part of the regular board of, that's why
Right.
that's in green, the regular board.
So you want to have a special meeting on the 10th of June as a public hearing for the budget? That's what you'd
Yeah,
have to do.
that-
And then the consideration of the budget would be on the 20th.
The 10th is a Saturday,
Okay.
and so is April 1st.
And aren't there some requirements about 10 days between the
When you give your budget message and the
public hearing?
I
and
believe it's,
It's 10 days, but the budget can be adopted after the same time that the public hearing is held. So the only thing that gets in there is 10 days between delivery of the budget message and the public hearing, so that's not a player.
You've seen that, too.
Public hearing is on about
Move
Yeah,
everything.
that's easy.
10 June, on about 10 June. Whatever we can figure out as far as the calendar
Or
goes.
the night,
That would be a Friday.
yeah, the night,
And what y'all would have to do is y'all would have to actually do the act of setting that public hearing in the May meeting, the May regular meeting, which would be okay.
yeah, I'll have to advertise it before then, but it's on, I have to advertise it.
Okay. Is that gonna be enough time to advertise?
I need to advertise 2 weeks prior, and I need like a week to advertise it, so maybe, we'd have to set the public hearing in April or sometime prior to, or just have consensus. I just need a date.
Okay.
So you're saying June the 10th?
Yeah, so could you go through that, Heather or David, somebody?
Just, what y'all have discussed so far is a 1 April on or about, date for the budget workshop, the second budget workshop on expenses. A May 15th date for,
Okay. Excuse me for interrupting you. Can we talk about a time on those days? So we can put it in our book, or is it?
April 3rd is actually a Monday, April 1st is a Saturday.
Okay.
So we talking about the first or the third?
The third.
What time are we gonna be doing that?
About the 9 o'clock morning time.
The best for,
Does that work for you?
that's fine, I'm open.
I'm open, if that works. Ken?
I'll make myself available.
All right, so April 3rd at 9 o'clock. All right, what's the next one?
May 15th is delivery of the budget message, and that would be a suspense on me only. That's not a workshop for the board.
We do that 9 o'clock in the morning as well, or
No, that's,
That's
Not a meeting.
that's a deliverable from me to you.
deliverable? Oh, okay.
And then, 10 June, what did we say about that? 9 June.
9th.
9
That's a
June is a Friday
Right.
for the public hearing. What works for y'all?
Anything works for me.
I'm good.
Likewise?
Probably 9
Yeah.
again. Be okay.
Was that 9 AM?
9, yeah.
Okay.
That work for you?
Okay, and then, of course, that would follow at the regular meeting would be the consideration, based on that, public hearing on the 9th. The regular board meeting is the 20th. And, that, you do not have to adopt it at that regular meeting. If something comes up.
But we can, right?
Yes, you can. And then the in red, no later than 30th June, that's just a prompt for the board. You gotta do that. You
Right.
can't go before that. Okay,
Yeah, great, thank you.
all right. That's what I needed for the schedule, y'all. On the other handout that I provided to you, based on the commissioner's inputs, what I attempted to do was just, group those items that seem to be related together. Some of yours may be split out and different from where you gave it to me. But what I tried to do was just organize them logically there. And, would provide that to you for your discussion and elaboration as you see fit. I can comment as, if you'd like.
Yeah, how-
Give my perspective on some of them.
Sure.
And you can, throttle me back if I open up too loud and too wide. But if that's what you'd like to do, I will. Just, plan to operate without a tax increase in general. That's something that we always do. That's kind of the normal, I hesitate to use the mantra, but, any tax increase that I've delivered up or proposed to the board in the past has always been tied to a specific programmatic. It's always, there's a general level of expenses, and then there's, special things. For example, in our streets plan, there's a direct correlation between the penny that we charge and the 10-year capital plan. You know, we're taking down about $100,000 a year there. And as relates to, of course, a revenue neutral budget, revenue neutral normally is a term that's used whenever there's a revaluation, but we will have some property base or tax base increases due to new construction. Those aren't tremendous, and one of the things about advancing the schedule, we're not going to have the benefit of the completely updated tax scroll that will reflect that. Of course, there's always some construction in progress, so it should be fairly close. There's not going to be a windfall there on a whole bunch of new construction showing up in the tax scroll. And also, we're restricted by law on what we can project based on last year's tax collection rate. So there will be some movement in the ad valorem tax rate, but there will probably be more movement on the personal property side because of some of the realities that we're seeing with the way motor vehicle taxes are collected. Now you can't go get tags on your car without paying your property tax. So, you know.
Excuse me, David, you mentioned revaluation. What is the schedule for property revaluation?
It's every 4 years in Brunswick County.
Okay.
Margaret, when's the next one? 2019.
But it has to be done every 8 years.
Has to be done every 8 years. Brunswick County's opted for every 4 years. The next one would be 2019.
What happens with the new construction? How are they valued? They're gonna be valued right away for taxes, right?
That's right. And there is a way that that's done because there's construction in progress, and then when it gets a certificate of occupancy, and that's about as much as I know. Margaret, can you? Tim may know that one.
I know that.
Okay.
It's whatever exists on January.
The 1st of January. Yeah, that's
If
a
it's half
simple.
built and a third built, the county will tell you. You don't
Yeah.
tell them.
Yeah.
Do we have a forecast on how much our tax revenue would increase based on the rate of building we're doing now? Ballparkish,
No.
I mean, is it 25, 50, 100,000 a year? You know, no feel for it?
I haven't gotten there yet with it. Based on construction trends at the time we get ready to do the budget, I normally try to get some grasp of it, then I hadn't done that yet.
Okay.
Yeah. But I do want to talk about new tax revenues. And because everyone that has input to me anyway, correctly or incorrectly, sometimes may use a frame of reference for other locations, our neighboring communities, and new tax revenues. I want to make sure that everybody understands, we don't have a liquor store, y'all, and other beach communities do. Now, that's a big revenue there. What it is, I know it yields more than a penny tax rate in terms of revenue for some of the smaller communities. Some of the larger communities, it yields quite a bit more. I think Oak Island has 2 liquor stores, so, it's a Long Island. But, anyway, that was just the new tax revenue that I wanted to relate to that. Increase.
Who builds that, though?
I'm sorry.
Who builds an ABC store? I mean, who's responsible for something like that?
It's almost like a franchise is what it is. There's
ABC stores are?
It's almost like a franchise, but it's very strictly regulated. ABC Commission, and I mean, you actually have to establish an ABC board. There's a whole set of circumstances. I'm not recommending that we get into a start, let's get a Holden Beach liquor store. I just want to point that out, is that the town's operating without the benefit of a revenue that other beach towns are, especially when it comes to the amount of revenues, tax-wise, that you have available to you.
Okay.
Increased fund balance reserves. We actually met with the local government commission. They actually have a traveling squad. It's called the coach team, to look at our books, and this is in addition of reviewing our books with the audit committee. The coach team actually dives in, looking at your budgetary processes, your financial processes, as a type of it's not in the terms of a traditional oversight and audit, but more of how they can help. They call themselves the coach team. And through discussions with them, they're suggesting for Holden Beach that the board, and I agree, that right now our fund balance policy is a bit dated, and one of the specifics that we can improve on, and we don't have to have a fund balance policy that says it's 43%. They suggest a fund balance policy that's phrased something like 40 to 70%, and then if your fund balance exceeds 70%, that you would look at utilizing the overage of that for capital purposes. And that's loosely phrased, but Mandy, you and Margaret were there. That's what I understood from them. So with the budget message that I'll draft, I always talk to fund balance, and we're talking general fund balance. I would include a proposed fund balance policy in there for your consideration, something like that. And then, of course, we can just roll that over into the budget ordinance, if you wanted to look at establishing a fund balance policy concurrent with the budget ordinance, like we did the capital plan, and then have it all covered. That's one way to do it, and we can discuss it more, but that's what I'm getting from the coach team members after them looking at this year's budget that we have. Now, the local government commission, the report that you got on the audit, that's looking backwards at last year's books. And what this coach team, they're actually in a separate section, the fiscal management section, and they're more of an operational nature instead of the auditing perspective in the rest of it. So,
David, how would you describe our current position?
whatever the audit said,
No, I mean-
our current position, with
Fund
fund
balance.
balance, aren't we?
No, I don't need numbers. How would you describe it? You think we're in good shape, we need improvement?
Here's what you're going to get whenever you attempt to establish a peer group. And your peer group, Holden Beach is a one-off. I mean, you're a one-off, and you're unique. We are unique. Whenever you attempt to establish a peer group, it's going to show that other beach communities have better than 100% fund balance. However, I'm not sure that their books separate their occupancy tax from their general fund. I'm not saying that other places do it incorrectly. I know that our occupancy tax is not included in our general fund, and we do that as a separate fund because that's the way that we've been led legislatively to set that up.
Yeah, and I agree, it's hard to do apples to apples.
Right.
But the
Right.
last thing I saw, we were 35%, and I agree with and that's looking back, understand.
It's whatever,
And I agree
forget
with,
what's in
I
it.
agree with the philosophy is you don't want to be too much. I think I like the, the range 30,
Yeah.
40 to 70, otherwise why, you're using, because, and especially the nature of the island. It's a lot of people coming and going, so you don't want to be banking current residents for future residents. Totally agree with the concept. So I'm just asking, as far as, the last number I saw, we're not within that comfort zone.
Right. And the unassigned fund balance is what we're talking about.
Right.
And unassigned fund, because there
Right.
are fund balances and,
Right, all over,
and
right.
pieces of them are carved out.
Yep.
But the unassigned fund balance is what we're talking about. That would be what, my mother used to refer to as her pin money. And that's the walking around. That is almost, I hate to use discretionary, but that is the, money that is totally within the commissioner's control to program for whatever services and purposes that they desire
Right.
to do. Whether it be capital, horses,
Or
what.
hold over until next year.
Right.
Or,
That's right. Now, and therein lies the difference between assigned and unassigned fund balance, because normally if you want to establish reserve accounts, then that money now becomes assigned and is not available for other purposes and has to be specific to a definite project. And that's kind of the decision point, the tipping point, if you will, on how much of your available cash you want to tie up. Am I saying anything wrong, Mark? Because that's that's the sharp pencil right there.
Well, it seemed to be a number that was highlighted when we were looking
It
to
is.
go to financing, and it's
And
still an
it's-
important number.
It's what the banks, it's
Right.
not only is it what the treasurer looks at when they're evaluating your stability, liquidity, worthiness, but it's what the banks look at whenever you go to deal with them. That said, it's not the end all on whether or not you can borrow. Not only do you have your general fund, but you have your other funds also and fortunately, we do have strong cash positions in the water fund specifically.
Right.
But aren't we looking primarily at, if we had a frozen revenue stream, how long can we last? How much money do we have to pay the bills?
That's what that unassigned fund balance, well, the gross fund balance, it really represents. And 8% is what's required, and that is that 30 days?
It's a month.
Yeah, it's a month,
A
yeah,
month.
that's what required. And so, I mean, if you do 40%, you got 5 months worth of fund balance if everything else goes away.
Yeah, so I think, I like your approach, the 40 to 70, and I think we need to, that should definitely be a very top priority to
and
meet.
a designation of overage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
B Park, Beach Strand Centric, yearly funding next round of beach nourishment at the CRP rate. I think I know what that means, but let me remind the board of what's in front of you now that we've got the Central Reach project underway. That's one of the first things that you have to do, and there's a couple of other ones in here that are related, is you gotta pay your debt service now. I mean, that's by law, you gotta pay your notes. The second thing that's related to that is that the town, if it wants to be ready for the next round of hurricane damage fixing, you're gonna have to get a new permit, because you're Winchestered on this one. This one's done. I mean, there's 100,000 yards of headroom in it, and we've got some pieces of other permits that remain from like our hall project and the turkey trap over there. But for a large-scale project, you're going to have to get another permit. That is, if you want to be ready in the situation or the event that we get hypothetically speaking, we get a bad storm next fall, and we're sitting here at the same time next year trying to get FEMA to work done to repair the beach. Instead of 100,000 yards, we're looking at 1 million yards of damage. You have to have a large permit in place in order to kickstart that thing. If we wait until that event occurs to get a permit, you'll be lucky to see a permit for 2 years. Of course, now we do have a new administration in, so I don't know what's gonna happen as far as some of the regulations. What I see happening is, if you want to get ready for the next round, that your B-part budget should include the initiation of that permitting effort. Now, how much it gonna cost? I don't know. The last time, since it's a new permit, you gotta have engineering. I would think that we have a lot of the work done, especially on our sand source. However, I don't know how much scrubbing on that existing permit will need to be done and updated. I don't know how much it's gonna cost, but you're gonna have to get a permit.
Yeah, CRP is Central Reach Project. We have the benefit of hindsight now, right? Because we're doing the Central Reach Project, we just went through the funding of that. And if we could look back 10 years, we would have, I would have hoped, set aside more funding to do that. That's what this line item's about.
Okay.
So, I understand, 8 to 10 years or 10 to 12 years, whatever, pick a date, in the near future, relatively, we have to fund, we have the possibility of funding another major Central Reach project. Because Central Reach wasn't about any storm, it was about,
That's right.
just normal erosion of the beach. So that's where that's coming from.
Okay, just additionally, recognize the fact that there's maintenance of the strand that has to happen. If what you're saying is to set aside $1 million out of the 1.6 of revenue out of occupancy tax, I don't think you can get there.
Right.
But I totally understand that, and to some extent, I believe we have done that in the past. However, it's probably not as visible as a discrete pot of money, other than, when you get the audit, you say that there's, there's $6 million of B-part fund balance at the end of the year, and that's available.
So are you leading towards your jump to create a separate, the separate sand fund? Is that?
Here's my comment on creating a separate sand fund, because of the law that says, we take 6 pennies from, occupancy tax, you gotta give the county 1. 3 of it's supposed to be used for, I think this is right, erosion control, and 2 of it is supposed to be used for tourism-related purposes. You can set up, if you have a project, it's very easy to set up a, let's call it, new beach project, or whatever you wanted to do to put money into that project. Just realize that it will restrict the board's ability to interpret how that occupancy tax in total is used. I mean, it will. However, that law is written for your interpretation, and how you choose to define tourism-related purposes, the other 2 cents can be used for beach nourishment. However, the realities of our circumstances are that we got trash related to tourists. The list goes on and on, relating to how that other 2 cents is defined.
Yeah.
Have I gotten off track there? I'm sorry.
No, I mean, you used the word restrict, I would use the word discipline. Same, just different perspective. I think you gotta pick up the trash, you gotta have the police, and you also have to renourish the beach.
That's right.
So I think the pendulum had swayed, from my point of view, because we just borrowed $15 million, the pendulum had swayed away from sand and towards the other, and I think it's time to reapply some more discipline towards the sand.
That, my comment to you when I sent it in was to, in effect, we try to wean ourselves from depending on the B-Part fund to pay operating expenses for the town. So without hurting anything and staying within constraints, to slow it down of using so much of the B-Part fund and try to keep as much in there as possible for the future, primarily for beach nourishment.
Well, I'll make this comment as far as using that money for tourism-related purposes, and this may be a function of people just not knowing, but I've actually gone through and looked at a line by line and tried to make an adjudication on what's sand or beach and what's tourism-related, and we're not spending 2% on tourism-related functions. I've done that over the course of several years. I haven't updated it recently, but in general, we're spending more on sand, if you will, on the maintenance and sand fence, vegetation, engineering services to qualify our beach for Category G. Those are sand-related expenses. That's not picking up trash. That's beach-related expenses. But anyway, I hear you, and I
You get the message,
I
Jimmy?
get that. I
Okay.
understand.
That's,
Okay.
thank you.
Establish a 5% operating expense reduction plan. Gas is gonna cost what gas costs, and the attorney's gonna charge us, depending on how much trouble we get into, and I see that. Expenses are just gonna go up, y'all. There's more people here, they're gonna have more demands for services, and we'll peel that back. One of the specific items that it's exemplematic of expenses going up, this building now is coming up on 8 years old, and you're gonna see things like the wallpaper coming off the wall, the generator needing to be painted. The air conditioners out here that's on the south side of the building, there's 13 of them, they're gonna start dying here. I'm really surprised if we get 2 more years out of these air conditioners here. So that's some of the things the realities that we're gonna see. I hear this, I understand it, and, we'll take a crack at it.
David, how much did you save beyond the budget this last year, June 30th last year? How much did you undershoot the budget?
In terms of the measure
Overall.
between actual revenues that came in, it's probably about
Okay.
$100,000.
100,000? And took another 100,000 out of the B part fund into the general fund?
That's including the, all the transfers, the actual,
Yeah.
deltas between actual expenses and actual, revenues.
In fact, in every fund, or every action of the town, you saved money last year versus the budget.
Right.
Right.
Well, I just look
So-
at that as skills and abilities
Well,
on my
that's
part.
what we're at. I
you
think
know?
the board is asking,
You
let's try to keep
I
doing
mean, don't
that.
penalize the
No,
town
no,
because
no,
I'm
no.
good.
That's a plus, but it also says,
Yeah.
it's not gonna break your back to try to keep
Well,
doing
we'll-
that. That's what the board would like
Yeah.
to see, I think.
Yes, sir. Got it. Reduce or maintain current debt level. Generally speaking, I believe our glide slopes on all of our actuaries, may have one of our big notes that are level payments, but most of those are, the house payment on the town hall here is lower this year than it was last year, those kind of things. I am assuming that what that really is that there is no appetite from the board to finance any other capital improvements. That's what, nobody's communicated it to me anyway.
Most of the calls I get is, when does this get paid off? When does this get paid off? And I think, based on the nature of our residents anyway, they're not out working and making more money and more money. They're on fixed incomes, many of them. And I think that's the thing they're concerned about. Just don't keep adding up more and more debt.
So yeah, you mentioned some, I could add that the maintenance and that reduction should
Right.
pay for itself, theoretically.
And I haven't looked at it, but what we hope for is that the maintenance will be less than what the reduction in the payment is. Yeah, there'll be some residual one way or the other there. Review and update the capital improvement plan. Last year, the establishment of, a hard 10-year program was a great step forward for the town, I think. What, of course, we'll see in that a couple of items, and if I jump out of order here, just bring me back to center. With our sewer vulnerability assessment, that's one of the things, regardless of how that plays out, that's a logical change in there. Of course, the streets, if we can get our this year's paving out of the way, that'll fall off. And I don't have any intent to update that street survey. We don't need to update that street survey until we get about 5 years in. I mean, if the street should stay relatively, the same based on, I just don't see that changing unless we have a storm and it really, messes up something.
Could I go off on a tangent here about streets? I've been traveling 211, unfortunately, an awful lot. And if anybody's gone out 211, there's a section on one side of a bridge that was like our Brunswick Avenue, and they repaved it.
Where is it, 211?
Out towards 74. It's probably 5 miles out.
Up near
So-
Bolton, after you get past the green swamp up there, all the
Yeah,
way.
right
to-
after you get past Green Swamp. I don't know, Tim's shaking his head. There was a section that I used to have to go in the middle of the lane because you're doing this, just like our road. I'd be real curious, and maybe somebody can look into that, how they, and and it happened right away. So I don't think they did a major project. I think they just filled, and I'd be curious how I'll keep an eye on it for a year and see if it kind of deteriorates further, but it's, I think of the exact same thing we have in Brunswick Avenue. So next time you head that way, look for that new pavement.
Okay.
But anyway, so, sorry.
That's the main road that the highway patrol uses to get here to me. They come back and forth that way, that's their, I talked to them, it doesn't take them any time to get from Elizabeth, town to Southport going down that road, so I'm sure after they bump through it a couple times, they got it fixed.
Hitting it at 80.
Yeah, my daughter's familiar with the highway patrol on that road too.
Yeah, they love that road.
Can we just asphalt low spots or not? Can you
That
smooth
was,
it out by?
that's what I think they did. So I'd be curious to see what engineering and whether it would last.
Well, they don't
But-
have, they don't have a vacuum sewer up underneath that road either. But we've
Anyway,
talked
I'll
about
find a
that,
tangent.
yeah, okay.
Sorry.
Improved budget clarity and transparency, i.e. unspent budget line item transfers. I don't anticipate, a whole lot of budget line item transfers. I know what this is talking about. Last year, when the board approved the 0.7 salary equalization, it was approved in bulk, as a wellness line item. And as we got close to the year end, that money was moved around, depending on what, where the pay equalization was incurred. So it wasn't put in there in the beginning, was just kind of bulk budgeted. But with the, establishment of the audit committee and their regular assembly, and the fact that we've got those prior year personnel things accommodated in this budget, unless gas goes to $6 a gallon or something like that, I don't see that happening. Now, I do want to go ahead and forewarn you that with the Central Reach project and the way that we're funding it with FEMA, there's a lot of square pegs and round holes as far as how those different line items are budgeted. And when we get to the end, I'll go ahead and tell you that there's gonna be some shavings left on the sides. The way I was thinking about that is that probably the area that those square pegs and round holes make up, they're probably zero, but when you start smashing them in, there's some sides that are going to get shaved off. So that would be where if there's room, because we just did a programmatic budget on that. It's the first time we've done it, and I'll be really surprised if those don't have to, don't show some overages or underages. And I'm almost of a mind to not bother with moving them around as long as, at the fund level there, it comes out to be zero.
Yeah, and the purpose is not to hinder your creativity, but at all.
I like that word. I like that word.
It's just, the town, it's transparency. That's the point.
Okay.
Well, and I think in general, just at our regular board meetings, when we get, like at the last meeting, when we get the report and we know current status, where are we? Where are we in this line item? How much have we spent? How much do we still owe? That's extremely helpful.
Okay.
Yep.
Infrastructure, moving on to the next section there. Roads priority program and execution as established for the upcoming year. I think that's pretty straightforward, and establish a capital line item to fund a second water tower. Before we start going to build a second water tower, I want to recommend to the board that what we need to do, the town needs to have done, is a PER, Professional Engineers Report, that basically goes through, I mean, it's similar to the same exercise that went through whenever you do any type of public utility provision, and that's how much you're using now, how much do you think you're gonna use, some of the specifics about your physical plant now, where would you locate it, how would you fund it, and that would be the type of thing I would recommend for the board. Unless y'all are prepared today to tell me how big you want it built, what color you want it painted, where you want it put, and that kind of thing. But that's the normal process that you go through. That's just kind of been, Chris and I have talked about it for several years now. But I think that this scare that we just went through with the water line up at the north, the Cape Fear River up there, plus some of the things that we've seen whenever we've had fires on the beach here in the past, that, you know, that's brought that into focus. And I don't want to, you know, for the board to get out there and say that, you know, we got to put a water tower up because the second line broke up there. I just think that that's the natural evolution of the town to go in. I think Ocean Isle Beach has 3. If you want to talk about piers, you know, there's 3, maybe that's the high rise down there, but I think that they've got 3 water towers down there.
So,
So then do we need to put into this budget money for that kind of report?
Right. Yeah.
let's do that first before we, so the capital line item for a second water tower, would that be under the
You can just,
water and sewer?
it'd be in the
fund?
water and sewer fund,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
And,
I thought that was the
yeah,
assumption, but.
it would be in the water and sewer fund, the water department. And what, just so you'll know, that's not an overnight process, because some of it deals with, investigatory or exploratory, potential funding streams, and depending on like USDA, they actually, whenever you do these PERs, if you can capture some of the work, they have special requirements that they ask for. If you can capture some of those in the infancy of that report, it's better, and it gives you more options if you do some of that legwork up front as far as other potential funding streams. But so what we're talking about is probably a 10-month, give or take 4 months, you know, might as well say a year on doing that kind of thing. And I would say that we're talking, well, I don't want to say what we're talking, because just as soon as I do, then it gets put in, basically it becomes a default bid. You know, so the way that would work is we would solicit for engineering services to do that kind of thing. But it ain't cheap.
But I think my view was here that the board waited a long time to really get serious about the sewer system and whether or not we had to do something about the sewer. Where are you with regard to the water tower? Is it something we ought to be on right quick, or is it an issue?
You need
Should
to
we
do-
start getting after it pretty quick?
With the June, end of June, 1st of July budget, you should take this next year to assess and accommodate what your future needs are. And then once that's done, then the next year you can make a determination on moving forward with one. Actual construction of a water tower,
That's a long way off, but
Yeah, but we're talking about funding this PER,
right,
right?
yeah.
That,
You're,
that's,
you're where you need to be
right, okay.
if you fund this in July.
right.
Sewer study, get it done, programmed, prioritized, and executed. And I ad-libbed there a little bit based on several inputs. in my interpretation of what the commissioners relayed to me. I mean, we're, as far as updating the capital improvement plan, we got a sewer study underway, and when those results come to us, I mean, we make those decisions.
Yep.
And likewise, finish what we have on the table, sewer system assessment and associated improvements, terminal growing EIS, and the Part F grant project. I mean, there are several things on the table that we've got in the works that we've got to finish. Now, they will go over into next year, and you'll have to drag them across budget years, but, you know, those are long-lived projects, and, you know, the thrust of that comment is we need to finish what's on our plate before we go back to the buffet line again. Establish a sand fund equivalent to 5% of the budget. B part may be used as revenue source. Line item may be capital or expense as appropriate. That you know, parlays into the actual creation of a project or the formulation of a project with the, with getting another permit. That is a direct correlation there, so. And I think we talked about begin to reduce reliance on the B-Part fund to pay for town operations expenses and start to concentrate on increasing B-Part in anticipation of major renourishment projects in 2027. You know, who knows with getting another permit, we may not be able to have a permit that's got a shelf life of 10 years. Some of that may enter into it too.
Yeah,
But yeah, I understand this as general guidance. And I will tell for the boards, this is a lot easier to start attempting to craft a budget with the commissioners setting up a skeleton schedule and communicating what their perspectives are than it is going into it blind. So, thank you.
But what I saw with this and with the list you sent back was not that the board, we don't talk about it, but not that the board was complaining about anything. They recognize you've got a lot of things on the plate. Every time you send us a report about what you did that week, I go, wow, that's a heck of a job. So they just ask you to keep focused, just keep your focus,
That's what this does.
and just don't get careless.
But we're trying not to get careless.
Yeah, that's just,
But sometimes when you're in triage,
Stand.
you know, and you're using a machete to cut things off, or it might not be as surgical as you had hoped for, but.
Might not be as pretty as you'd
Yeah.
like.
And I think maybe some of the way that these things have been asked about B-Part, maybe the question wasn't asked correctly. And I'm gonna see, I don't know if, I'm gonna see if I can ask. And if I don't ask the right way, y'all step in. And it might be just about saving money. And I'm not sure exactly, if it's even prudent for us to think of it in terms of saving money. Because I know I get a lot of questions all the time, why aren't we, you know, saving more and holding on to more? You know, and I know B-Part has to be spent on certain things. And I think that we do save money. But I think that there is a question, why aren't we squirreling more away, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it's like we were discussing earlier, there's a balance to that, right?
Yeah,
You don't want to say.
too much.
Sounds crazy, but you don't want to save too much.
No.
You know, because you don't want to, you know, scrimp and save for the future. You want to have a balance.
Right.
And like I said,
And I think that.
more
we
discipline
are.
towards the sand side on the B part. That's all
I,
my direction would be.
You prompted a thought from me. One of the things that the town has in the near recent past had thrust on it is the fact that Holden Beach has benefited from 30 years of the Army Corps of Engineers dredging that inlet and putting the sand on the east end. Whether it's sand that's beneficial, reuse of the dredge material from the Lockwood Folly Crossing, that's really navigation that provides sand, or the inlet throat. That's not something that the town has really focused on in the past, but it's coming home to roost now with just the way that congressional priorities and national priorities are stacking up. Will that go completely away? The president's budget hasn't had any money in it for about 3 years, or it's very, it's a little more than just what I call surveying work for all of the shallow draft inlets in North Carolina. That's gonna be something that we're gonna have to deal with. And, to some extent, we've gotten out ahead of it at the grassroots level and worked the General Assembly to establish that shallow draft inlet maintenance dredging fund, which isn't so much for sand all the time, but it is a byproduct, and whenever we can, we like to see if we can't marry up with those efforts. That's gonna be an issue for the town to deal with here in the not too distant future, especially in light of the fact that Oak Island is going to be putting together a grand plan on doing beach nourishment, and how and if their sand source is the Lockwood Folly Inlet, that may have implications for the entire east end of Holden Beach, and or if the offshore borrow site for the town's Central Reach project is also targeted as a sand source for that. So, those are kind of seemingly unrelated issues that has a lot of potential to affect the way that, we manage the strand and potential impacts on our beachfront. And,
And on our ability to save.
Yeah, thanks for bringing, yeah. So, anyway, I just,
And I think my message is just, I appreciate conservative spending and your focus on that.
okay.
Anything else? I'm happy.
I'm good.
Now, I guess I'd have one thing in the comments I've gotten about the west of 800. Do we plan to renourish, and do we need a permit for that? Can you get a permit for that? Or
Doesn't need to be nourished, and it will actually be frowned upon by the regulators to nourish that area.
would it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's all the sand, and that's part of the crafting of
So we're,
the.
fingers
of the-
crossed that some of that's gonna be swept down and put on that part of the beach.
Oh, it will be swept down. The reason why it's 600 feet from the toe of the frontal dune on the west end out to the water is 30 years worth of the Corps dredging the inlet and putting it on the east end of Holden Beach. It all goes that way. That's the littoral drift. Now, that's the realities of it.
So we're not renourishing it with Central Beach, but we are.
We are.
That is the answer, is that it's being taken care of, and
Without a
the
permit for
actual,
the 800 block.
the actual coastal engineer term for it is, it's a sand engine, and there are techniques that basically just put, depending on how the littoral drift works, they just put a blob of sand on one end of the beach, and it looks like a tadpole with a big head and a little tail. And over a period of years, the sand will migrate and equilibrate down the beach based on the.
So if Oak Island puts 2-3 million yards on theirs, we could hope to,
It's gonna end up in the inlet.
but then we'll pump it onto our beach.
Gotta have permit.
That's where you go.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think we're good.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, David.
Adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.